Every Robin Hood film for the last 35 years has been bad. Kevin Costner, Russell Crowe, Taron Egerton, all of them without exception, have landed below 60% on Rotten Tomatoes. 35 years of failed attempts at one of the most enduring legends in English history. The death of Robin Hood just broke that streak, and it did it by doing the one thing none of these films were brave enough to do. It asked what Robin Hood actually was, and it didn't like the answer. Here's the setup. Robin Hood is old, weathered, unkempt, gravely injured after what he hoped would be his final battle. He's taken in by a mysterious woman, played by Jodie, who offers him shelter, care, and something he has never been offered before, a chance at salvation. While he recovers, he is forced to reckon with the gap between the legend everyone believes about him and the brutal, blood-soaked reality of what he actually did and who he actually was. This is not a heist film. There is no stealing from the rich, giving to the poor in any meaningful sense. This is a death march. A grim, deliberate, muddy reckoning with a man who spent his life committing violence in the name of a cause and is now trying to work out whether that cause was ever real or whether the violence was always the point. It's written and directed by Michael Sarnoski, the man behind Pig, which remains one of the most quietly devastating films of the last decade, and A Quiet Place Day One. He is a filmmaker who specializes in stripping away mythology to find the raw human truth underneath. He has found the perfect subject. The question is whether he's found the right film. Let me start with what this film gets absolutely undeniably right. Hugh Jackman. Not Hugh Jackman doing his movie star thing. Not Hugh Jackman being charming and physically imposing. Hugh Jackman completely, uncomfortably, unrecognizably disappearing into a man who is broken in every way a man can be broken. Physically, morally, spiritually. The Globe and Mail called him a godsend in the title role. The San Francisco Chronicle gave the film a perfect 4 out of 4 and described his work as a redemption story richly complicated in ways that sneak up on you. And they're right. Jackman produces a performance of raw intensity and weathered gravitas that sits in a category with his very best work. Does it equal Logan? It's close enough that the comparison is not embarrassing for either film, and that is the highest compliment I can give. The first act of this film is extraordinary and genuinely shocking. Sarnoski opens in full widescreen dark hellish colour, the Celtic fringe of 1247 AD rendered in mud and blood and grey English light, and proceeds to dismantle every previous cinematic Robin Hood completely. This is not a hero. Every act of so-called heroism in the opening is also an act of violence, and Sarnoski forces you to sit with both things simultaneously. Jodie brings her considerable ability to a role that functions as Robin's conscience and potential salvation. She is excellent in every scene, and the film is most alive when it is simply her and Jackman in a space together. Bill Skarsgård as Little John is doing quietly captivating work, but they could have used more of him. When he's on screen, something complicated and interesting happens that the film doesn't always give him space to complete. And the film's thematic relevance is genuine and timely. A story about a man who committed violence in the name of the poor while the wealth gap widened around him. A man whose legend grew precisely because the truth was too complicated. Feels startlingly pertinent in 2026 in a way that Sarnoski clearly intends and earns. Now here's where I have to be straight with you, because the film earns everything it gets, and also falls short of what it could have been. The tonal shift between the brutal first act and the slower character study that follows is jarring in a way that isn't entirely intentional. The first 30 minutes are among the most viscerally powerful things A24 has released this year, and then the film slows, dramatically, deliberately, almost defiantly, into a meditative crawl that tests your patience in ways that don't always feel earned. It becomes sluggish. There are stretches in the middle 2/3 where the film is clearly reaching for profundity and achieving stillness instead. The film is beautifully constructed but inert as a thriller and ultimately feckless as a character study. It is gorgeously made and thematically shallow in equal measure. The film raises genuine questions about mythology versus truth, about whether violence in service of a just cause is still violence, and then circles those questions rather than interrogating them. Richard Lester's Robin and Marianne from 1976, a film made from the same source material, engaged more directly and more daringly with the same ideas. And Coleman and Skarsgård, both exceptional, both capable of so much, are consistently underdeveloped. The supporting cast exists primarily to reflect Robin's internal journey rather than to have journeys of their own. In a film this interested in truth over myth, that's a creative choice that works against itself. Here's where I land. The death of Robin Hood is not Logan. I want to say that clearly because the comparison is everywhere and it sets an expectation this film can't always meet. Logan was a film where every emotional beat landed with the force of 17 years of accumulated feeling. This film is reaching for the same register, an aging hero, a brutal world, a final reckoning, and it reaches it only in patches. The first act and the final act are genuinely moving. The middle two-thirds are where the film tests your commitment. But here's what it is. It's the best Robin Hood film in 50 years. It features a Hugh Jackman performance that belongs among his very finest. It is a serious, adult, beautifully photographed A24 film about a subject that deserves serious treatment and has never quite received it. And it broke a 35-year streak of failed adaptations. Not by being a perfect film, but by being a genuinely brave one. Michael Sarnoski looked at Robin Hood and asked the question no filmmaker before him was willing to ask. What if he wasn't the hero of his own story? That question is worth asking. This film is worth seeing for the way Jackman answers it. I'm giving The Death of Robin Hood a 6.5 out of 10. See it for Hugh Jackman. Stay for the question it leaves you with. Like the video if this helped, subscribe for weekly reviews, and tell me in the comments, is Robin Hood a hero or a killer who made himself a good story? Because after this film, I genuinely don't know anymore. And I think that's the point. See you next time.